This story is 100% fiction. All elements are imaginary. Coincidences with reality are accidental. But 18. Entertainment only. Matteo Ferrante's coffee was exactly 2 degrees below the ideal temperature. Loren knew this because he made her redo it 3 times a day, every day, for 2 years. And because on that specific morning, the morning her entire life would crumble, she had spilled the perfect coffee all over his Italian silk shirt. It wasn't intentional, technically. "My shirt," Matteo said, staring at the brown stain spreading across the white fabric like a death sentence in slow motion. His voice was so calm that Loren felt a shiver run down her spine. "This shirt costs more than your monthly salary." 3 salaries, Loren corrected mentally, but said nothing. She just stood there, the tray trembling in her hands, her red hair escaping from the professional bun she'd been fighting to maintain since 6 in the morning. I'll pay for it," she murmured, knowing it was an absurd lie. Matteo lifted his dark eyes to her. There was something there, something she could never quite decipher. Irritation, amusement. His eyes were like oil wells, deep, dark, and potentially explosive. With what? He tilted his head, the tattoo on his neck, a serpent coiled around a dagger, moving with the gesture. "Your non-existent savings? Your second job at the bar on 5th Street that you think I don't know about? Or maybe by selling that car that barely runs and that you insist on driving even when it rains?" Loren swallowed hard. He knew. Of course he knew. Matteo Ferrante was the kind of man who knew how many times you breathed per minute if it was useful to him. Leave, Loren." She blinked. "What? Leave." He returned his attention to the documents on his desk as if she had already ceased to exist. "Take the rest of the day off. You're distracted. Distracted employees make mistakes. Mistakes cost me money, and I hate losing money." It was a dismissal. A clear and unequivocal dismissal. And Loren should have accepted it. Should have thanked him, grabbed her purse, and gone straight to St. Marcus Hospital, where her 7-year-old little brother was connected to machines that beeped with every irregular beat of his defective heart. But she couldn't, because the clock was running. "Mr. Ferrante," she said, and her voice came out steadier than she expected. "I need to talk to you. It's urgent." Matteo didn't look up. "Schedule it with my new secretary." "You don't have a new secretary." "I will in approximately." He checked the gold watch on his wrist. 3 hours if you keep standing there annoying me." Loren felt panic rise up her throat like bile. 2 years. 2 years she had worked for this man, enduring his impossible demands, his icy temperament, his 3 a.m. meetings with men in dark overcoats who made her sign confidentiality agreements just for being in the same building. She knew who he was, what he was. Everyone in the city knew. Matteo Ferrante wasn't just a businessman. He was the heir to the Ferrante family. The family that controlled every port, every shipping route, every legitimate business that served as a front for an empire built on blood and silence. And she was about to ask him for money. "God, help me. My brother is dying." The words came out before she could stop them. Raw, desperate, pathetic. Matteo finally stopped writing. The silence that followed was so dense that Loren could hear her own heart beating. Thump, 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 like a distorted echo of the monitors in Enzo's hospital room. "Repeat that," Matteo said. "My brother, Enzo. He's 7 years old and—" Loren took a deep breath, forcing the words out. "He was born with a heart defect. The doctors always said that eventually he'd need surgery, but we thought we'd have more time. But last week he collapsed at school and now they're saying if he doesn't have the operation in the next 2 weeks his heart will just stop." She didn't cry. She couldn't afford that luxury. Crying in front of Matteo Ferrante was like bleeding in front of a shark. "And?" he asked, his voice completely devoid of emotion. "And the surgery costs $300,000. Insurance won't cover it. I've already sold everything I could sell. I've already borrowed from everyone I know. My mother—" Loren hesitated. "My mother isn't in a position to help. Isn't in a position to do anything except empty bottles of cheap vodka and cry over her dead husband." She thought, but didn't say. "So you want money?" It wasn't a question. "I'll pay it back. Every cent. I can sign whatever you want. Work as many hours as necessary. Loren," the way he said her name, low, almost soft, made her stop immediately. "How long have you worked for me?" 2 years, sir." 2 years. He stood up and Loren was reminded once again of how big he was. Not just tall but present. The kind of man who walked into a room and made the air feel heavier. And in that time, How many times have you seen me do charity? She stayed silent. How many times? None, she admitted. Exactly. Matteo circled the desk, approaching her with slow, deliberate steps. Lauren resisted the urge to back away. I don't give money, Lauren. I invest. And investments require returns. I said I'll pay. With what? He stopped less than a meter from her, and Lauren could smell his cologne. Something expensive and woody that always made her slightly dizzy. Your salary barely covers your household bills. You support a mother who doesn't work and a sick brother. You drive a 10-year-old car and you've been wearing the same 3 suits in rotation since you started here. He tilted his head, studying her. You're smart, Lauren. Do the math. How long would it take you to pay me back $300,000? Lauren clenched her fists at her sides. I'd find a way. No, you wouldn't. You'd die trying and I'd never see my money. He paused. Or your brother would die first, which would make the debt a weight you'd carry for the rest of your life. It was cruel. It was calculated. It was true. And Lauren hated that it was true. So that's it? She asked, her voice trembling despite all her efforts. My brother dies because I have nothing to offer? Something changed in Matteo's face. A shadow. A flash. So quick she almost missed it. I didn't say that. Lauren blinked. What? Matteo returned to his desk but didn't sit. Instead, he leaned against the edge, crossing his arms over his broad chest. The posture was almost casual, but his eyes were anything but. You're 24 years old, he said. Healthy. Fertile, I assume. Lauren's stomach dropped. Mr. Ferrante, my grandfather is dying. The words came out without ceremony, as if he were commenting on the weather. Liver failure. The doctors say he has weeks, maybe a month at most. And the old bastard has one demand before he goes. To see a Ferrante heir. A legitimate grandchild to ensure the continuation of the bloodline. Lauren felt her blood freeze in her veins. I don't understand what that has to do with me. No? Matteo raised an eyebrow. You're smart, Lauren. I know you are. So stop pretending you haven't connected the dots. She had connected them. Of course she had. But the rational part of her brain, the part that still worked, that still believed in things like dignity and choice, refused to accept it. You're asking me to? She couldn't finish the sentence. I'm offering you a deal. Matteo corrected her, as if there were any difference. One night, one heir. You stay with me until the child is born, under my roof, my protection, with all your needs met. And in exchange, your brother has his surgery tomorrow. With the best specialist on the East Coast, I already have the name. He had researched. Before this conversation even happened, he had already researched. Why? The question escaped before she could contain it. There are hundreds of women who would do this for free. Rich, beautiful women who would kill for the chance to carry a Ferrante heir. Why me? Matteo studied her for a long moment. Lauren felt like a chess piece being evaluated, not as a person, but as a strategic move. Because you're discreet, he said finally. Because you're loyal. Because in 2 years you've never sold a single piece of information about me, even when I know you were approached. He paused. And because you have no choice, which means you won't give me problems. It was horrible. It was monstrous. It was the only chance Enzo had. And after? Lauren asked, her voice hoarse. After the child is born, you leave, with $1 million, clean documents, and my guarantee that no one will ever bother you. The child stays with me. The child stays with me. Lauren closed her eyes. Behind her eyelids, she saw Enzo, small, fragile, with the same green eyes as her, laughing while trying to build a Lego tower from his hospital bed. She saw the tubes in his arms, the monitors, the doctor saying 2 weeks at most in that clinical voice that didn't match the death sentence it carried. And she saw her mother, unconscious on the couch at 10 in the morning, surrounded by empty bottles. If Enzo died, her mother would die too. Not physically. That would be too merciful. But the part of her that was still human, that still functioned, would disappear forever, and Lauren would be alone. She opened her eyes. I need time to think. You don't have time. Matteo straightened, buttoning his jacket with precise movements. Your brother doesn't have time. The offer expires at midnight. After that, you'll have to find another miracle. He walked to the door but stopped before leaving. One thing, Lauren. He looked over his shoulder, and for an instant, a single instant, she saw something in his eyes that seemed almost human. If you say yes, I won't hurt you. I'm not that kind of monster. But I also won't pretend this is anything else. It's a deal. A transaction. And when it's over, it's over. And then he was gone. Lauren stood in the empty office for exactly 3 minutes and 42 seconds. She knew because she counted every second, as if time could somehow slow down if she paid enough attention. It didn't. St. Marcus Hospital smelled like disinfectant and despair. Lauren knew every hallway, every nurse, every coffee machine that swallowed coins and spit out liquid that vaguely resembled coffee. She had spent more nights there than in her own bed over the past few weeks. Enzo's room was on the 3rd floor pediatric wing. The walls were painted with jungle animal drawings, smiling giraffes, elephants with bows on their necks, lions that looked more like walking pillows than predators. It was the hospital's attempt to make that place seem less like what it really was, a place where children went to die. No, Lauren corrected herself as she pushed the door open. Not Enzo. Not him. Lauren! Enzo's voice was weak, but his eyes, big, green, hopeful, lit up when they saw her. You came early today. She forced a smile as she approached the bed. My boss let me off early. Did he yell at you again? He never yells. Lauren sat in the chair next to the bed, taking her brother's thin little hand. He just speaks very quietly when he's angry, which is worse, actually. Enzo wrinkled his nose. He sounds scary. You have no idea, Lauren thought. He's just complicated. Mom came today, Enzo said, and the subject change made Lauren stiffen. She brought the bear. Lauren looked at the teddy bear on the nightstand. It was old, worn, with a loose button eye, and an ear that Lauren had sewn at least 5 times. It had been their father's. Did she stay long? Enzo looked away. A little bit. Long enough to leave the bear and get out before the nurses could smell the alcohol. Lauren translated mentally. Hey. She squeezed her brother's hand. Look at me. He obeyed, and Lauren saw it there, behind the manufactured courage, behind the smiles he forced to make her feel better. The fear. A fear that no 7-year-old should know. You're going to be okay, she said, and every word was a knife in her own chest. I promise. How do you know? Because I'm going to sell my soul to make sure of it. Because I'm your big sister, she said instead. And big sisters know everything. Enzo smiled. A small smile, but real. You're the best sister in the world. I'm not, Lauren thought as she stroked his hair. But I will be. I'll be whatever you need me to be. It was 11:47 at night when Lauren stopped in front of the Ferrante mansion. The building rose against the dark sky like a monument to power and money. White stone, windows that glowed with amber light, meticulously maintained gardens that seemed to mock everyone who couldn't afford them. There were security guards at the gate, men in suits who carried guns under their jackets and smiles that never reached their eyes. Name, one of them said, blocking her path. Lauren Hayes. Mr. Ferrante is expecting me. The guard studied her for a moment. Her simple dress, her hair that had escaped its bun hours ago, the dark circle she hadn't even tried to hide, and something in his look said he knew exactly why she was there. You can go in. The doors opened, and Lauren walked inside. The interior of the mansion was exactly as she had imagined. Opulent, cold, designed to impress and intimidate. Paintings worth more than the house she grew up in. Crystal chandeliers that probably cost more than Enzo's surgery. A butler led her through silent hallways to a living room that was bigger than her entire apartment. And there, standing by a lit fireplace, was Matteo. He had changed from the coffee-stained shirt to another, black this time, open at the first few buttons, sleeves rolled up to his elbows. The tattoo on his neck was more visible this way, as were the others that descended down his forearms. Symbols that Lauren didn't recognize, but that probably meant things she didn't want to know. You came. He didn't seem surprised. Of course not. Men like Matteo Ferrante didn't get surprised. They calculated. I have conditions, Lauren said, lifting her chin. For the first time since she had known him, Matteo seemed genuinely interested. Conditions, he repeated, and there was something in his voice, amusement, respect, that she couldn't identify. My brother has the surgery tomorrow. Not later, not when it's convenient. Tomorrow. Done. I want to see the transfer to the hospital before any agreement is consummated. Reasonable. And I want visitation rights. Matteo raised an eyebrow. Visitation? To the child. Lauren forced the words out, ignoring the knot forming in her throat. After I leave. I don't want to be a mother on paper only. I need to be able to see my son or daughter. The silence that followed was long enough to make Loren wonder if she had gone too far. Then Matteo did something unexpected. He smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. Nothing about Matteo Ferrante was kind, but it wasn't cruel either. It was calculating, as if she had made a move he hadn't entirely anticipated. Visitation, he said, almost to himself. Interesting. Is that a no? It's an, I'll consider it. He moved closer, and Loren fought the urge to retreat. Any other demands, Miss Hayes? There were a million of them. A million things she wanted to scream. That this was wrong. That she wasn't an incubator. That if there were any other option in the world, she would have chosen it. But there wasn't. Just one more, she said. When this is over, when the child is born and I leave, you will never tell them that I was bought. If someday they ask about me, you'll say that I loved them, even if it's a lie. Matteo was silent for so long that Loren thought he wouldn't respond. Then, so quietly she almost missed it, he said, "It won't be a lie." Loren blinked. What? But Matteo had already turned, walking toward a table where a bottle of whiskey waited. The contract will be ready tomorrow, he said, pouring 2 glasses. You can bring a lawyer if you want, I'll pay. After all, he turned back, extending a glass to her. We're about to be partners. Loren looked at the glass, at the hand holding it, large, with scars on the fingers that told stories she didn't want to hear, at the man who was offering her a golden cage in exchange for the only thing that truly mattered. She took the glass. To partnership then, she said, raising the whiskey in a bitter toast. Matteo smiled, that wolf smile that did something strange to her stomach. To partnership. Outside, the full moon shone over Chicago like a silent witness, and somewhere, a clock struck midnight. The contract was 47 pages long. Loren knew because she counted them twice, sitting in Matteo's home office at 9 in the morning, while a lawyer who looked like he had sold his soul decades ago explained each clause in excruciating detail. Section 12B covers medical expenses, the lawyer droned. All prenatal care, delivery costs, and postpartum recovery will be handled by Mr. Ferrante's personal physician. I want to choose my own doctor, Loren said. The lawyer blinked, clearly unaccustomed to interruptions. Miss Hayes, she can choose. Matteo's voice came from across the room, where he stood by the window, watching the city below like a king surveying his kingdom. Add it. The lawyer scribbled something in the margins, his pen moving with the practiced efficiency of a man who had amended countless impossible contracts. Loren turned the page. Section 13, Living Arrangements. The party of the second part, hereafter referred to as the mother, shall reside in the Ferrante estate for the duration of the pregnancy and for a period not exceeding 30 days following delivery. I need to visit my brother, she said, and my mother, regularly. Twice a week, Matteo said without turning. With security, without security. Now he turned. Those dark eyes found hers, and Loren felt that familiar shiver, the one that told her she was poking a sleeping dragon. With security, he repeated slower this time. Or not at all. They stared at each other for a long moment. The lawyer shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Finally, Loren looked away. Fine, she heard rather than saw Matteo's smirk. Bastard. 3 hours later, Loren Hayes signed her name on the dotted line and became, for all legal purposes, property of the Ferrante family. Not officially, of course. The contract was carefully worded to avoid anything that might suggest coercion or human trafficking. But Loren knew what she had just done. She had sold herself. The surgery is scheduled for 2 o'clock, Matteo said, handing her a folder. Dr. Harrison Chen, best pediatric cardiac surgeon in the country. He flew in from Boston this morning. Loren stared at the folder. Inside were medical documents, consent forms, and a bank statement showing a transfer of $350,000 to St. Marcus Hospital. It was done. Enzo would live. She should feel relieved, grateful, something other than the cold emptiness that had settled in her chest. Thank you, she said, and the words tasted like ash. Matteo studied her for a moment. Don't thank me yet. You haven't met my family. The Ferrante family dinner was held in a dining room that could comfortably seat 30 people. Tonight, there were only 5. At the head of the table sat Vincenzo Ferrante, the dying patriarch. He was smaller than Loren had imagined, shrunken by illness, but his eyes were sharp, calculating. The same eyes his grandson had inherited. To his right was Matteo's mother, Carmela, a beautiful woman in her 60s who looked at Loren like she was inspecting a stain on an expensive carpet. Across from her sat Matteo's younger brother, Marco, 25, charming smile, the kind of man who probably broke hearts for sport. And at the foot of the table, as far from his grandfather as physically possible, was Matteo. Loren sat beside him, feeling distinctly like a lamb that had wandered into a wolf den. "So," Vincenzo said, his voice raspy but commanding, "this is the girl." "Loren," Matteo corrected. "Her name is Loren. I know her name." The old man's eyes never left Loren's face. "I also know her father died in a factory accident when she was 16. Her mother drinks. Her brother is sick." He paused. "And she's been working for you for 2 years without ever being late once." Loren's blood ran cold. He had investigated her. Of course he had. "You did your homework," she said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. Vincenzo's lips twitched. "I like her. She has spine. She has red hair," Carmela muttered. "Ferrante children have dark hair. Genetics don't work that way, mother," Matteo said dryly. "Don't lecture me about genetics. I gave birth to you. A fact you remind me of constantly." Marco laughed, earning a glare from his mother. "What? It's funny." "Nothing about this situation is funny," Carmela snapped. "My son is having a child with his secretary. Do you know what people will say?" "I don't care what people say," Matteo replied. "I never have. That's the problem." Loren sat very still, watching the family dynamics unfold like a car crash in slow motion. This was what she had signed up for. 9 months of this. God help me. "Miss Hayes." Vincenzo's voice cut through the bickering. "Do you know why my grandson chose you?" Loren met the old man's gaze. "Because I have no choice. And people without choices don't cause problems." Silence fell over the table. Then Vincenzo laughed, a dry, rattling sound that turned into a cough. When he recovered, there was something almost like approval in his eyes. "Matteo," he said, "she's too smart for you." "I'm aware," Matteo replied. And when Loren glanced at him, she could have sworn she saw the ghost of a real smile. That night, Loren stood in her new bedroom, a suite bigger than her entire apartment with a 4-poster bed and a view of the gardens, and tried to remember how to breathe. Enzo's surgery had been successful. Dr. Chen had called it textbook perfect. Her little brother would live. He would live. And all it had cost was everything. A knock on the door made her jump. "Come in," she said, expecting a maid. It was Matteo. He had changed from his dinner suit into something more casual. Dark jeans, a black t-shirt that did nothing to hide the muscles underneath. He looked almost normal. If normal men had eyes like midnight and hands that had probably killed people. "Settling in?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe. "Trying to. The staff has been instructed to give you anything you need, within reason. And what's considered unreasonable? Escape attempts." He said it like a joke, but his eyes weren't laughing. Loren crossed her arms. "I signed the contract. I'm not going anywhere." "No, you're not." He pushed off the doorframe, taking a step into the room. "But I want to make something clear, Loren. You're not a prisoner here. You're an investment. The difference matters." "Does it?" "To me, yes." He stopped a few feet away, close enough that she had to tilt her head to meet his eyes. "I don't hurt women. I don't force them. When the time comes for us to fulfill the contract, it will be because you're willing, not because you're scared." Loren felt something shift in her chest. Not trust. She wasn't stupid enough for that, but something. "And if I'm never willing?" she asked. Matteo studied her for a long moment. "Then we find another way. But I don't think that will be a problem." "You're awfully confident." "I'm realistic." He smiled. That wolf smile again. "Good night, Loren. Sleep well." He turned and walked out, closing the door softly behind him. Loren stood there for a long time, staring at the spot where he had been. What have I gotten myself into? Outside her window, the Chicago skyline glittered like a promise or a threat. She couldn't tell which. 2 weeks passed in the Ferrante mansion like a strange dream. Loren developed a routine. Mornings were spent visiting Enzo, who was recovering faster than anyone expected. Afternoons, she wandered the estate, mapping escape routes she would never use. Evenings were family dinners, verbal warfare disguised as polite conversation. And nights she spent alone, staring at the ceiling, wondering when Matteo would come to collect. He never did. Not once. It was driving her insane. "You're thinking too loud," Marco said, dropping onto the garden bench beside her. "I can hear it from inside." Loren didn't look up from her book. "Don't you have someone else to annoy?" Several people, actually, but you're my favorite. He stretched his legs out, looking annoyingly relaxed. So, what's bothering you? Nothing. Liar. Marco grinned. Is it my brother? It's my brother, isn't it? Lauren finally looked at him. Marco was handsome in a different way than Matteo. Softer edges, easier smile, the kind of charm that came naturally. But his eyes held the same darkness, the same secrets. Your brother is confusing, she admitted. That's one word for it. Marco plucked a flower from the nearby bush, twirling it between his fingers. Want some advice? From you? I know him better than anyone. Except maybe the old man. He handed her the flower, a red rose, thorns removed. Matteo doesn't do anything without reason. If he hasn't come to you yet, it's because he's waiting. For what? Marco's smile turned knowing. For you to come to him. That night, Lauren couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the shadows on the ceiling, Marco's words echoing in her mind. For you to come to him. It was manipulation. She knew that. Everything the Ferrantes did was calculated, strategic. Even kindness came with strings attached. But there was something else. Something she had noticed over the past 2 weeks. The way Matteo watched her at dinner, not with hunger, but with curiosity. The way he remembered that she liked her coffee with exactly 1 sugar. The way he had personally called Dr. Mitchell every day to check on Enzo's recovery, even though he thought she didn't know. He was a monster. But maybe he was a monster who was trying not to be. Before she could talk herself out of it, Lauren threw off the covers and walked to her door. The hallway was dark, lit only by moonlight streaming through tall windows. Her bare feet made no sound on the marble floor as she walked. Past the family portraits, past the library, past the room where Vincenzo slept, connected to machines that beeped through the night. Matteo's door was at the end of the hall. She stopped in front of it, heart pounding. This is insane, she thought. Turn around. Go back to bed. She knocked. 3 seconds. 5. 10. The door opened. Matteo stood there in nothing but sleep pants, his chest bare, tattoos on full display. His hair was disheveled, his eyes heavy with sleep. He had never looked more dangerous, or more beautiful. Lauren. His voice was rough. It's 2 in the morning. I know. Is something wrong? No. She took a breath. I'm here because I want to be. Something flickered in his eyes. You don't have to do this tonight. The contract. Forget the contract. The words surprised her as much as him. For one night, forget the contract. Forget the deal. Forget everything except... She paused, searching for courage. Except that I'm here, and I'm choosing this. Matteo didn't move, didn't breathe. You're choosing, he repeated slowly. Yes. And tomorrow? Tomorrow we go back to the contract. But tonight, she stepped closer, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his skin. Tonight I don't want to be an investment. I want to be a woman. Just a woman. The silence stretched between them, heavy, electric, alive. Then Matteo moved. His hand came up to cup her face, gentle in a way she hadn't expected. His thumb traced her cheekbone, her jaw, the corner of her mouth. If we do this, he said quietly, there's no going back. You understand that? I understand. And you still want... Matteo. She placed her hand over his, pressing it against her cheek. Stop talking. He kissed her like a man drowning. Desperate. Consuming. Like she was air and he had been underwater for years. Lauren had been kissed before. Clumsy boys in high school, forgettable dates in college. Nothing had prepared her for this. For the way Matteo's hands tangled in her hair. For the way he lifted her like she weighed nothing. For the way he looked at her like she was the most precious thing he had ever held. He carried her to his bed. Massive, dark, fit for a king. And laid her down with a tenderness that made her chest ache. We can stop, he said, hovering above her. Any time. Just say the word. I don't want to stop. And she meant it. God help her, she meant it. What followed was nothing like she had imagined. Not cold, not transactional, not the clinical fulfillment of a contract clause. It was fire and whispers, gentle hands and racing hearts. It was Matteo learning her like a map, memorizing every response, every sigh, every gasp. It was Lauren discovering that beneath the monster was a man, broken, guarded, desperate for something he couldn't name. When it was over, they lay tangled together in the dark, breathing hard. The world outside forgotten. This isn't just a transaction anymore, is it? Lauren whispered. Matteo was quiet for a long moment. No, he finally said. It's not. Dawn came too soon. Lauren woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains, in an unfamiliar bed with a very familiar arm wrapped around her waist. Matteo was still asleep. She studied him in the morning light, the sharp lines of his face softened by sleep, the tattoos that told stories she was only beginning to understand, the small scar on his collarbone that she had traced with her fingers last night. He looked younger like this, less like a mafia heir, more like a man who carried too much weight on his shoulders. Staring is creepy, he mumbled without opening his eyes. Lauren smiled despite herself. You're one to talk. I've seen you stare at me across the office for 2 years. That was professional observation. That was creepy. His eyes opened, and the smile that crossed his face was different from the wolf smile she knew. Softer, almost shy. Good morning, he said. Good morning. They lay there in comfortable silence, the events of the night settling around them like dust after a storm. What happens now? Lauren asked. Matteo's arm tightened around her. Now, we figure it out. Figure what out? This. He gestured between them. Whatever this is. I thought you had everything figured out, calculated, planned. I did. He turned to face her fully. And then you knocked on my door at 2 a.m. and destroyed every plan I had. Sorry. Don't be. He tucked a strand of red hair behind her ear. It was about time someone did. Breakfast that morning was different. When Lauren walked into the dining room, Carmela took one look at her and choked on her coffee. Marco grinned like he had won a bet. Vincenzo simply nodded as if he had expected this all along. And Matteo pulled out her chair, his hand lingering on her shoulder just a moment too long. You look well rested, Carmela said, her voice dripping with implications. I slept wonderfully, Lauren replied sweetly. The beds here are very comfortable. Marco burst out laughing. Even Vincenzo cracked a smile. And somewhere between the coffee and the pastries, Lauren realized something terrifying. She wasn't pretending anymore. Whatever was growing between her and Matteo, this strange, complicated, impossible thing, it was real. And that changed everything. 6 weeks after the night that changed everything, Lauren's body declared war. It started small, a wave of nausea during breakfast that she blamed on Carmela's cooking, exhaustion that she attributed to the stress of living in a mansion full of criminals, sensitivity to smells that made the kitchen unbearable. She ignored it all, until she couldn't. You look terrible, Marco announced, dropping into the chair across from her in the library. And I mean that in the most loving way possible. Lauren didn't lift her head from the book she wasn't reading. Thank you. Your support means everything. Seriously. He leaned forward, studying her face. You're pale. Have you eaten today? I had toast. Toast isn't food. Toast is what food aspires to be when it gives up on life. Despite everything, Lauren laughed. Over the past weeks, Marco had become something unexpected. A friend. The annoying little brother she never wanted but somehow ended up with. I'm fine, she said. Just tired. You've been just tired for 2 weeks. Marco's playful tone shifted to something more serious. Matteo's worried. He won't say it because he's emotionally constipated, but he is. Matteo worries about his investments. Is that what you think you are? Marco raised an eyebrow. An investment? Lauren didn't answer. The truth was, she didn't know what she was anymore. The lines between contract and reality had blurred so completely that she couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. She and Matteo hadn't discussed what was happening between them. They shared meals, conversations, occasional touches that lingered too long. Some nights he came to her room. Some nights she went to his. But neither of them had put words to it. Words made things real. Real things could be destroyed. I'm fine, she repeated more firmly this time. Really? She stood up to prove it. The world tilted sideways. Lauren. Marco's voice came from very far away as the floor rushed up to meet her. Then everything went black. She woke to the smell of antiseptic and the steady beep of monitors. Hospital, her brain registered. Why am I in a hospital? She's waking up. The voice was Matteo's. Lauren turned her head, slowly because it felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds, and found him sitting beside her bed. He looked terrible. His hair was disheveled, his shirt wrinkled, his jaw covered in stubble that suggested he hadn't shaved in at least a day. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his hands, those dangerous, capable hands, were clasped together so tightly that his knuckles had gone white. What happened? Lauren croaked. You fainted. Matteo's voice was carefully controlled, but she could hear the cracks beneath. In the library. Marco caught you before you hit your head. I need to send him a thank you card. This isn't funny, Lauren. I know. She tried to sit up, but Mateo's hand on her shoulder stopped her. How long was I out? 3 hours. The doctors ran tests. He paused, and something in his expression shifted. They found something. Lauren's heart stopped. What? What's wrong? Is it serious? You're not sick. Mateo's voice softened in a way she had never heard before. You're pregnant. The word hung in the air between them. Pregnant. Pregnant. That's... Lauren blinked, trying to process. That's impossible. It's only been 6 weeks. These things take time. Apparently the chances were in our favor. Was that a smile tugging at his lips? The doctor confirmed it. 6 weeks along. Everything looks healthy. Pregnant. She was pregnant. With Mateo Ferrante's child. The child she had agreed to give up. Oh God. Lauren pressed her hand to her stomach. Flat. Unchanged. Giving no indication of the life growing inside. Oh God. Lauren. Mateo took her hand, his grip warm and steady. Breathe. I can't, She was spiraling. She knew she was spiraling, but she couldn't stop. The contract, the baby, your grandfather, I'm supposed to leave after, but I can't just, how am I supposed to? Lauren? Mateo's other hand came up to cup her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. Stop. Breathe. We'll figure this out. Figure what out? I signed a contract. I agreed to give you a child and walk away. But that was before I... She couldn't say it. Couldn't admit that somewhere between the contract and the shared dinners and the nights in his arms, she had done the unthinkable. She had fallen in love with him. Before you what? Mateo asked quietly. Lauren looked at him, really looked at him. At the man who had bought her body but somehow stolen her heart. At the monster who brought her coffee exactly how she liked it. At the mafia heir who called the hospital every day to check on her little brother. Before everything changed, she whispered. Mateo was silent for a long moment. Then he leaned forward and pressed his forehead to hers. I know, he said. It changed for me too. The doctor returned an hour later. A kind woman with gray hair and a warm smile who seemed completely unfazed by the armed guards stationed outside the room. Miss Hayes? She checked the monitors, made notes on her clipboard. Your vitals are stable. The fainting was caused by a combination of low blood pressure and dehydration, both common in early pregnancy. I'm prescribing prenatal vitamins and recommending plenty of rest. When can I go home? Lauren asked, then caught herself. The mansion wasn't home. It was a gilded cage, wasn't it? Tomorrow morning, assuming everything stays stable overnight. The doctor smiled. Congratulations, by the way. First child? Yes, Lauren said. It's an adventure. The doctor glanced at Mateo. Make sure she takes it easy, Mr. Ferrante. The first trimester is delicate. She won't lift a finger, Mateo said. I'll make sure of it. When the doctor left, Loren turned to him. I'm not an invalid. No, you're carrying my child. His voice softened. Our child. And I'm not taking any chances. Our child. The word sent a wave of warmth through her chest, followed immediately by a wave of fear. What happens now? She asked. With the contract. With us. Mateo stood walking to the window. The city sprawled below, glittering and indifferent. My grandfather wanted an heir, he said slowly. He's getting one. The terms of the contract are technically fulfilled. Technically. But things have changed. He turned to face her. I've changed. And I don't think I can go through with the original plan. Lauren's heart stuttered. What do you mean? I mean, he ran a hand through his hair, looking more uncertain than she had ever seen him. I don't want you to leave, Lauren. After the baby is born or ever, I want you to stay. As what? Your investment, your incubator, as my partner. The word hung in the air. As the mother of my child. As, he hesitated. As someone I care about. More than I should. More than I planned to. Lauren stared at him. You care about me. Is that so hard to believe? Yes, actually. You bought me, Mateo. You literally purchased my body for... I know what I did. His jaw tightened. I know it was wrong. I knew it was wrong when I did it, but I was desperate and you were desperate and I told myself it was just business. He crossed to her bedside, taking her hand again. It stopped being business the moment you knocked on my door. Tears burned behind Lauren's eyes. This is insane. I know. We're insane. Probably. Your family will never accept this. Your mother already hates me. Your grandfather... My grandfather, Mateo interrupted, told me this morning that if I let you go, I'm a bigger fool than he thought. Lauren blinked. He said that? He also said that Ferrante men are idiots when it comes to women, but occasionally we get lucky. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. I think he likes you more than he likes me. A laugh escaped her. Wet, shaky, utterly unexpected. This is crazy. Yes. We barely know each other. We have time to fix that. I'm carrying your baby. I'm aware. Mateo's hand moved to her stomach, resting there with a gentleness that made her heart ache. Our baby. Lauren placed her hand over his. Beneath their joined palms, a new life was growing. A life that had started as a transaction but had become something infinitely more precious. I'm terrified, she admitted. So am I, Mateo said. But I'd rather be terrified with you than safe without you. It wasn't a declaration of love, not yet, but it was something close. Something real and raw and honest in a way that neither of them had expected. Okay, Lauren whispered. Okay? Okay, I'll stay. She squeezed his hand. But we're tearing up that contract. Mateo smiled. A real smile. Warm and bright and utterly transformative. Already done, he said. I burned it this morning. 3 months into her pregnancy, Lauren learned what the Ferrante family was truly capable of. It started with a phone call at dinner. They were all there. Vincenzo at the head of the table, weaker than last week but still commanding. Carmela pretending Lauren didn't exist. Marco making inappropriate jokes. And Mateo, whose hand had found hers under the tablecloth, somewhere between the salad and the main course. Things had changed in the weeks since the hospital. Not dramatically. The Ferrantes didn't do dramatic declarations or public displays of affection, but in small ways. A touch here, a glance there. Mateo moving her things into his room without asking, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. Maybe it was. Then Mateo's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and something in his face shifted. The warmth disappeared, replaced by something cold and sharp. Excuse me, he said, pushing back from the table. I need to take this. He was gone for 7 minutes. Lauren counted. When he returned, he wasn't the same man who had left. We have a problem, he said, looking at his grandfather. The Morellis. Vincenzo's frail hand tightened on his wineglass. What have they done? They hit one of our warehouses, killed 3 of our men, left a message. What message? Mateo's jaw clenched. They want a meeting, tomorrow night, or they start targeting family. The silence that followed was deafening. Lauren looked around the table, trying to read the reactions. Carmela had gone pale. Marco's easy smile had vanished entirely. And Vincenzo looked like a man who had been waiting for this moment his entire life. The Morellis, Lauren said quietly. Who are they? Our rivals, Marco answered when no one else did. They've controlled the South Side for 3 generations. We've had a truce for 15 years. Had, Mateo corrected. Past tense. Why would they break it now? Lauren asked. Everyone looked at Vincenzo. The old man smiled. A cold, bitter thing that held no warmth. Because I'm dying, and they think my grandson is weak. They're wrong, Mateo said. I know that. You know that. Vincenzo set down his glass. Now we make sure they know it too. That night, Lauren couldn't sleep. She lay in Mateo's bed, their bed now, staring at the ceiling while he paced by the window, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in rapid Italian to people whose names she didn't know about things she didn't want to understand. This was his world. The world she had married into. Not legally, not yet, but in every way that mattered. A world of warehouses and messages written in blood. A world where 3 men had died tonight, and tomorrow there might be more. Finally, Mateo ended the call. You should be sleeping, he said without turning around. So should you. I don't have that luxury. He ran a hand through his hair. The meeting is set. Tomorrow night, neutral ground. Just me and Dominic Morelli. And if it's a trap, then I'll handle it. Lauren sat up, her hand instinctively moving to her stomach. The bump was visible now. Small, but undeniable. A reminder of everything she had to lose. What aren't you telling me? She asked. Mateo finally turned. In the moonlight, he looked exhausted. Dangerous. Beautiful. The message they left, he said slowly. It wasn't just a threat. It was specific. They mentioned you. Lauren's blood ran cold. Me? They know about the pregnancy. They know you're living here. They know. He stopped, his hands curling into fists. They know everything. How? That's what I intend to find out. His voice was ice. Someone in this house is feeding them information. Someone I trusted. A traitor. In the Ferrante mansion. Someone who knew about her, about the baby, about everything. What does this mean? Lauren asked. For me? For the baby? Matteo crossed to the bed, sitting beside her, taking her hands in his. It means you don't leave this house without security. It means you don't go anywhere alone. It means... He paused, struggling with something. It means I might have to do things. Things you won't like. Things that will make you look at me differently. Matteo, I'm not a good man, Lauren. I've never pretended to be. I've done things that would make you sick. I've ordered things that would give you nightmares. His grip tightened. But everything I've done, everything I will do, it's to protect this family, to protect you, and I need to know that you can live with that. Lauren looked at him, really looked at him, at the monster who held her like she was precious, at the killer who brought her tea when she couldn't sleep, at the man who had burned a contract and built something real in its ashes. I knew what you were when I signed that contract, she said quietly. I knew what you were when I knocked on your door, and I know what you are now. She reached up, cupping his face in her hands. Do what you have to do, just come back to me. Something broke in Matteo's expression, some wall he had been holding up, some distance he had been maintaining. He kissed her, hard, desperate, like a man going to war who wasn't sure he would return. I love you, he said against her lips. I should have said it sooner. I should have said it every day since you knocked on my door. But I was scared and I was stupid and... I love you too, Lauren interrupted. Now stop talking and hold me. He did. For hours they lay tangled together, neither sleeping, both pretending tomorrow wasn't coming. But tomorrow always comes. The meeting was set for midnight at an abandoned factory on the edge of the city. Lauren wasn't supposed to be there. Matteo had been very clear about that. She was supposed to stay home, surrounded by guards, safe behind the mansion's walls. But when Marco came to her room at 11:30 with panic in his eyes, safety became irrelevant. It's a setup, Marco said, breathless. I found the traitor. It's Romano, head of security. He's been feeding the Morellis information for months. The meeting tonight isn't a negotiation, it's an execution. Lauren's heart stopped. Does Matteo know? I can't reach him, his phone is off. He always turns it off before meetings. Then we go, now. Lauren, you can't... That's the father of my child walking into an ambush. She was already moving, grabbing her coat, her hands shaking but her voice steady. Try to stop me. Marco didn't try. The factory was surrounded by shadows and silence. Lauren and Marco arrived just as the first gunshot rang out. Stay in the car, Marco ordered, pulling a gun from his jacket. I mean it, Lauren. Stay here. He was gone before she could argue. For 3 agonizing minutes, Lauren sat in the darkness, listening to the sounds of violence, gunshots, shouting, the sickening thuds of bodies hitting concrete, her hand pressed against her stomach, protecting the life inside, praying to whatever God would listen. Then silence. Terrible, absolute silence. The factory door burst open. Matteo emerged first, blood on his shirt, a cut above his eye, but alive, alive. Behind him came Marco, supporting a limping guard, and behind them, bodies, at least 4, none of them moving. Lauren was out of the car before she realized she was moving. You're supposed to be home, Matteo said when she reached him. You're supposed to be dead. She grabbed his face, checking the wound, assuring herself he was real. Romano sold you out. Marco found out. We came to warn you. I know. Matteo's voice was calm, too calm. Romano confessed, before he died. Lauren looked at his hands, at the blood that wasn't his. Matteo, don't. His eyes met hers and she saw it there. The darkness, the violence, the things she had always known lived inside him. Don't ask questions you don't want answered. She didn't. Instead, she took his bloody hand in hers and held on tight. Take me home, she said. The aftermath was quiet. The Morellis had lost their best chance. 4 of their men were dead, including Dominic Morelli's son. It wasn't a victory. Not really. It was a declaration. A message written in blood that said the Ferrantes were not to be underestimated. Vincenzo died 3 days later, peacefully, in his sleep, with a smile on his face that the nurses said was almost triumphant. He had lived long enough to see his grandson prove himself, long enough to know the family was in capable hands, long enough to know an heir was coming. At the funeral, Lauren stood beside Matteo as mourners paid their respects. She wore black, her bump visible now, her hand intertwined with his. Carmela stood on his other side, still cold, still distant, but present, a united front. He would have liked this, Carmela said quietly. seeing you two together. He always said you needed someone who wouldn't take your nonsense. It was the closest thing to approval Lorraine had ever received from her. She would take it. 4 months after Vincenzo's funeral, Matteo Ferrante did something no one expected. He proposed. Not in the way Lauren had imagined proposals happened, not with roses and candlelit dinners and rehearsed speeches. No. Matteo proposed at 3 in the morning, while Lauren was sitting on the bathroom floor in her pajamas, recovering from her latest bout of pregnancy nausea. "Marry me," he said, appearing in the doorway with a glass of water and a wet towel. Lauren looked up at him through watery eyes, her hair a disaster, her face pale and sweaty. "I'm literally sitting next to a toilet." I noticed. This is the least romantic moment in human history. I know. He crouched down beside her, pressing the cool towel to her forehead. "But I've been carrying this ring around for 3 weeks, waiting for the perfect moment, and I just realized something." "What?" "There is no perfect moment. There's just moments, and I want all of them. The good ones and the bad ones. The 3 a.m. bathroom floors and the family dinners. The fights and the making up." He pulled a small box from his pocket, opening it to reveal a ring. Simple, elegant, a diamond that caught the bathroom light like captured starfire. "I want everything, Lauren. With you. Only with you." Lauren stared at the ring, then at him, then at the toilet she was leaning against, and she laughed. "Is that a yes?" Matteo asked, a smile tugging at his lips. "It's a, you're insane, and I love you, and yes, I'll marry you." She grabbed his face and kissed him, morning breath and all. "But we're telling people you proposed somewhere romantic. I refuse to say you asked me to marry you next to a toilet. Deal." The wedding was held 6 weeks later in the Ferrante garden. It was small by mafia standards. Only 50 guests, most of them family or trusted associates. Carmela had wanted something larger, more ostentatious, befitting the Ferrante name, but Lauren had put her foot down. "I'm 7 months pregnant," she had said. "I'm not waddling down a cathedral aisle in front of 500 strangers." Surprisingly, Carmela had relented. Their relationship had shifted in the month since Vincenzo's death. Not warm, Carmela didn't do warm, but respectful. They had found common ground in their love for Matteo, even if they expressed it differently. Carmela showed love through criticism and control. Lorraine showed it through patience and the occasional well-timed sarcastic comment. It worked. The ceremony was simple. Lauren wore white, a flowing dress that accommodated her belly and made her feel, for the first time in her life, like something out of a fairy tale. Her red hair was loose, crowned with small white flowers. She carried a bouquet of roses, thorns removed. Marco walked her down the aisle. It had seemed right somehow. He had become the brother she never had. Annoying, protective, fiercely loyal. When she had asked him, he had actually gotten emotional. "Don't tell anyone," he had warned. "I have a reputation." "Your reputation is that you cry at dog commercials." That was one time. At the altar, Matteo waited in a black suit, looking every inch the powerful Don he had become. But when Lorraine reached him, when their eyes met, she saw something else entirely. She saw the man who made her coffee exactly right, who called the hospital every day to check on Enzo, who had burned a contract and built a life in its place. She saw a home. "You look beautiful," he murmured as she took her place beside him. "You look terrified." "I am." His hand found hers, squeezing tight, but it's the good kind of terrified. The vows were traditional. The kiss was not. Matteo dipped her so dramatically that Marco wolf whistled and Carmela covered her eyes. The guests cheered. Somewhere Lauren was certain Vincenzo was laughing. For the first time in her life, everything felt right. But the best part of the wedding wasn't the ceremony or the reception or the cake that Marco definitely ate too much of. It was the guests in the front row. Enzo sat there, healthy and whole, his heart beating strong and steady thanks to Dr. Mitchell's skilled hands. He had recovered completely in the month since his surgery, running, playing, being the energetic 7-year-old he was meant to be. When Lauren had walked down the aisle, he had given her a thumbs up and a gap-toothed grin that made her eyes burn with tears. Beside him sat their mother. That had been the harder miracle. 6 months ago, Margaret Hayes had been a shell of a woman, drowning in grief and alcohol, barely functional, unable to care for herself, let alone her children. Lauren had expected nothing to change, had accepted that some people were too broken to be fixed. But then Matteo had intervened. Without telling Lauren, he had found the best rehabilitation facility in the state. had paid for everything, the treatment, the therapy, the aftercare, had visited Margaret himself once to deliver a message that Lauren only learned about later. Your daughter saved my life, he had told her. The least you can do is try to be worthy of hers. Something in those words had reached Margaret where nothing else had. Maybe it was shame, maybe it was hope, maybe it was simply the realization that her children deserved better than what she had been giving them. She had entered treatment the next day. It wasn't perfect. Recovery never was. There were setbacks and struggles, moments when Lauren wondered if it would stick. But Margaret had been sober for 4 months now. She attended meetings. She called her sponsor. She showed up. At the wedding, she cried. I'm sorry, she whispered when she hugged Lauren afterward. For everything, I'm so sorry. I know, Mom. Lauren held her tight, breathing in the scent of clean clothes and coffee instead of alcohol. I know. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. That would take time. But it was a start. 9 months to the day after that night when Lauren knocked on Matteo's door, Valentina Rose Ferrante entered the world. She arrived at 3:47 in the morning, after 16 hours of labor that Lauren would later describe as the worst pain I've ever experienced, and I once worked for your father for 2 years. Matteo, who had faced down rival families and survived assassination attempts without flinching, turned pale during the delivery and had to sit down twice. Some mobster you are, Lauren had gasped between contractions. I can handle blood, he had replied weakly. This is different. This is your blood. But when the doctor placed Valentina in his arms for the first time, tiny, red-faced, screaming at the indignity of existence, something in Matteo Ferrante broke open. Lauren watched him hold their daughter, watched this powerful, dangerous man reduced to tears by a 7-pound infant, and felt her heart expand beyond anything she had thought possible. She has your hair, Matteo whispered, touching the tuft of copper fuzz on Valentina's head. And your frown. I don't frown. You're frowning right now. He wasn't. He was smiling, the biggest, most genuine smile Lauren had ever seen on his face. She's perfect, he said. She's ours. Ours. He looked up at Lauren, and in his eyes she saw everything, the fear and the joy, the weight of the past and the promise of the future. Thank you. For what? For knocking on my door, for saying yes, for giving me. He paused, struggling with words that didn't come easily to men like him, for giving me something worth protecting. Lauren reached out, touching his face, brushing away a tear he would later deny existed. You didn't buy me, Matteo, she said softly. You saved me, and I saved you right back. 1 year later, the Ferrante mansion was chaos. Valentina's first birthday party had taken over the entire ground floor. There were balloons everywhere, pink and white and gold, because Marco had insisted on going overboard. A cake the size of a small car sat in the dining room, and approximately 30 children were running around screaming while their parents tried to pretend they had everything under control. Lauren stood in the kitchen doorway, watching the madness unfold. Enzo, now 9 and tall for his age, was leading a group of kids in some kind of elaborate game involving pirates and treasure. His heart was strong, his energy boundless, his laughter constant. He spent weekends at the mansion now, spoiled rotten by Marco and reluctantly adored by Carmela. Margaret sat in the garden with a group of mothers sipping lemonade and looking healthier than Lauren had ever seen her. 14 months sober. She had gotten a job at a bookstore, started attending church, rebuilt her life piece by piece. Their relationship was still healing, but it was real now in a way it hadn't been since Lauren's father died. Carmela was holding Valentina, looking slightly terrified as the baby grabbed at her expensive necklace, but she hadn't put her down in an hour, and when she thought no one was looking, she smiled at her granddaughter with genuine warmth. Quite a party, Matteo said, appearing beside Lauren with 2 glasses of champagne. Your brother ordered a pony. Of course he did. There's a pony in our backyard, Matteo. I'll handle it. He handed her a glass, his fingers brushing hers. Later, they stood together, watching their family. This strange, broken, beautiful family they had built from the ashes of a contract. Do you ever regret it? Lauren asked. Any of it? Matteo considered the question. I regret how it started. The contract. The manipulation. You deserved better than that. But I don't regret where it led. He turned to face her, and even after a year of marriage, the intensity in his eyes still made her breath catch. I would burn the world down for you, Lauren. For you and Valentina. I would do everything exactly the same if it meant ending up here. That's either very romantic or slightly terrifying. Why not both? She laughed, leaning into him as his arm wrapped around her waist. Across the room, Valentina let out a shriek of delight as Marco made a funny face. Enzo ran past, chasing a balloon. Margaret caught Lauren's eye and waved. And Lorraine realized, standing there in the chaos, that she had finally found what she had spent her whole life searching for. Not security, not money, not even love, though she had that in abundance. She had found a place where she belonged. Happy? Matteo murmured against her hair. Lauren smiled, watching their daughter giggle, watching their family thrive, watching the life they had built together flourish. Yeah, she said. I really am. The end.